Welcome to another episode of Budget Save and Invest. Today I am joined by the Tristan Scott team, Jared and Sarah. Let's do a quick introduction to yourselves. Who wants to
Morning.
kick
Morning,
off?
Rob.
I'll let you go first, Jared.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Ross. I'm Jared from Tristan Scott, a buyer's agent. Looking forward to having a chat with you.
And I'm Sarah. I work with Jared as a buyer's agent also. We've got a really unique setup. I'm based in Sydney and Jared is based in Brisbane. We get a lot of clients in Sydney looking at purchasing in other areas, and Queensland's place to be buying, I believe, at the minute. Well, it is.
Cool. I'm going to kick off because I had a few issues, not issues, but like clients last week that were asking questions, and I just wanted to get your opinions on it. So I'm just going to start off with I got a few people that you get to the point, I suppose, if you're a family and you've got kids, and obviously holding property is, it can be stressful. And I would say that most people get caught out in this, what we call free property problem. So they've either got 3 investment properties, or they've got 1 principal place of residence and then 2 investment properties, and they just can't seem to get past 3 assets. So I just want your opinion on, how does someone get past that, and what's the sort of mentality they need to have? And if you're looking to grow a portfolio beyond 3, what's your sort of advice for those people?
I think personally, a lot of people seem to listen to people, whether it's at dinners or barbecues or whatnot, where people are so conservative and they go, there's no other strategies other than, borrowing and putting money down and just getting it in your personal name. They don't look outside. They listen to their friends or family for advice rather than speaking to experts such as yourself and going, okay, cool, that's fine. You've got 2 properties, which generally those 2 properties would be in personal names, but they don't look at trusts or they don't look at self-managed super fund. They're just so stuck in their ways, which means they never go above that 3 assets. I don't know what your thoughts are, Sarah, but I speak to a lot of people and they just go, my mate said, let's just stick with what we have in personal and not look beyond. Whereas they speak to someone like yourself, Ross, who goes, okay, cool, let's structure it like XYZ. Let's get a trust here. Let's look at your self-managed super fund. And before they know it, they're up to 5 or 6 properties. Then they're actually tied with someone who's looking beyond the 5th property as to how to structure their loan and setup.
Absolutely. I think it's an education piece, really. A lot of people don't know what they don't know. And, mum and dad have always bought and done it this way. And so that's everyone's thinking. They, as you said, Jared, people just, they listen to what everyone has done previously without really knowing their options.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the other thing as well is some people see their when you're beginning, you've obviously saved up all this big pot of money of savings, right? And you've been saving £3,000 a month or £2,000 a month for 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, to get this first property. And then sometimes to hold assets, your monthly savings diminishes because you're paying into, I don't know, you might have a negatively geared property that's costing you $800 a month or something like that. And as soon as you get 3 of those, suddenly they're like, oh, I'm not saving money. Well, but actually you are. It's forced savings, really. You've got assets now worth X, they're
Yes.
growing. You're not saving anymore, but that's absolutely fine because you're putting the money into the right thing, assets that are growing. But also, like you say, things like SMSFs are great because if you buy in an SMSF, you're not really paying towards that mortgage. Your mandatory contributions from your employer pays for most of it, and then the rest comes from the rental return. So that's one option. The other option, like you say, is, potentially doing it in trust structure, but also changing this mentality of P&I repayments. You can do things like interest-only repayments. You can extend the loan back out to 30 years so that you can hold the asset easily. And also, we're in a difficult period. The interest rates are still high, so it's harder to hold assets than it used to be. But you gotta go through the peaks and the troughs. And I try to say to people, if you've got multiple assets beyond 3, you just got to have a buffer in place for each one. So you might want to have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 sitting in an offset account linked to that one home, so you can kind of feel a bit stress-free about the whole situation, about holding on to it, and then working out a strategy to to then grow it. Because ultimately, like a lot of people, if you want to have like 3 properties isn't a bad retirement strategy, but 3 paid off properties is the strategy. So really, you got to
Yeah.
try and get to 6 or 7 or 8, right?
And that's, that scares a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't diversify either. They go, oh, we've got 2 units in this complex, so let's go get another one. I had this client last week. He has 4 units in the same complex about 30 minutes from Brisbane. And he said, oh, Jared, I really want to buy this other one. It's just come on the market. And it's the same thing. They just go, they're comfortable. They go, oh, yeah, we can do this. I think he's 45 or thereabouts. So he's 15 years minimum to retirement. And he's just comfortable with that. Whereas I presented a couple of options. One of those was regional. And we showed, the projections as to what he could unlock in 5 years' time alone. Far outweighed the comfortability piece where it was, oh yeah, cool. I've had these other ones for 10 years and they performed
yeah,
reasonably well. And we looked at that and it was like a 6.5% growth year on year, which is, okay. But then you look at these other options that are producing, 9, 10, 12% in some aspects. Obviously that's not guaranteed, but when you looked at that and then looked at the land banking piece, which this property we ended up purchasing for him actually had, then it just far outweighs in the long run. And unless you're looking at retirement in the next 5 years, then, as you say, with the interest only piece, there's no reason to not look at interest only because it doesn't matter. Definitely P&I as you approach retirement and or enter retirement.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And that brings me on to my next thing, right? So someone was asking in our budget saving invest group the other day, they're thinking about buying property, they don't know where to buy, but also they're trying to figure out which way to go with their direction. So they talked about balancing yield, growth,
Mm.
or instant equity, right? So do you go for high yield? Do you go for high growth, or do you go for a bargain property that gives you instant equity, or a combination of 2 of those, or
Oh.
3 of those, or whatever? So, what are your opinions on, let's say someone's buying their first property, let's say it's their first investment property. They might not have a principal place of residence, or they might have a principal place of residence, but they're looking to enter into the investment space. What would be your advice on one of those 3 aspects, like yield, growth, equity? What are you guys kind of looking at?
Given it's their first potential investment property, I think they have to be really strategic with how they buy because that's going to set them up for the next lot of property. So understanding their time frame as well, like, okay, we can do this one now. What's the next property purchase going to happen and how is that going to happen? So, getting them then to talk back to yourself, Ross, and go, okay, if we look at buying something and we're going to get a good capital growth and be able to pull out equity of X in 5 years, how does that then look? It's not a one size will fit everything. You've got to have an understanding of what the plan is and how to get there, because that will also then really provide the direction on what mix is the right mix for them. That's just my personal opinion. Jared, you might see things a little differently.
No, I completely agree. I always say to clients, look for that long term. I don't know about you. I've never had a client come to me and say, yeah, cool, I've got a year and a half and then I want to sell out. I need to make, 250,000 and this and that. Firstly, that's not the client for anyone, but it's definitely to look
Yeah.
long term. I always say to people, you have to, what do I say? I always say, everything in moderation, including moderation. And it comes down to everything. You want to have it so structured that, your yield's there, absolutely, because you've got bills to pay in there, especially if it's your first home or your first investment, whatever it may be. You kind of go from having all this free cash to all of a sudden there's, $600 a week that's chewed up in, well, not chewed up, that's invested
Yeah.
in your future with your mortgage, and then all the associated expenses with it. So it's just about getting that balance with everything, but making sure you buy sensibly, so that you do get the future growth, and ultimately the cash flow which is going to come with it. Because if you purchase now and say you pay 500,000, but then you're smart and you refinance in a few years' time because rates have dropped or whatever it may be, then you're going to be in that cash flow position where you can use that extra cash to purchase. And it's just balance. Balance is the biggest thing. But it's about seeing things on paper and looking at the data and numbers that back it up.
Yeah, yeah, I would completely agree. And it's circumstantial, like you touched
Mm.
on, like I I've got 2 young kids. Daycare is bloody expensive in Australia. That alone costs me $2,500 a month. So really, like if I'm looking to buy at the moment and grow a portfolio, I want things which are possibly gonna the balance might be that the growth isn't necessarily as high as some other areas, but at least I can go to bed sort of stress free, knowing that the yield is good enough and that it's not
Yeah.
gonna, stress me out. Whereas if you're like a young couple, you might be living at home with parents still, or you might be paying low rent at the moment in a home share or whatever. In that instance, you might want to go hell for leather. You might
Mm.
think, okay, we've got kids on the horizon in 5, 7 years' time. Let's just go for it for the next 5 years. So I think it's circumstantial to everyone's sort of, it's their timing, right? And then just trying to find out, okay, someone might be a high flyer on, X many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they might say, actually, all I'm interested in is capital growth. I don't care about yield. And it doesn't matter because they have the ability to hold that property. So you're right, it is circumstantial, but ultimately quality assets outweighs everything.
Yep.
For sure.
And it also comes down to then, do you purchase an apartment or a townhouse that's in a body corporate against a freestanding house, or do you go metro over regional? And
Mm.
everything just comes into it. As you say, it's very circumstantial. And an apartment that has $10,000 a year in body corporate may not be for a first home buyer, because they do just want that mortgage paid and are happy to chip in 150 a week to the mortgage. But then when it comes to body corporates, we know that sometimes they can go south, and all of a sudden there's an extra 5-10,000 a year that has to come out because the pool has sprung a leak or whatever it may be. And so again, it's all factoring in different types of properties, locations, and everyone's circumstances, and again, everything
Yeah,
in moderation.
yeah, 100%. I want to dive into some questions for the BSI members for the second half of this. So just want your opinion and thoughts on a few of these. Some of them are a bit out there. Let's kick off with question 1. We're looking at investing in a holiday unit in Port Douglas.
Well, yes, I did see that. Yeah, yeah.
Airbnb and holiday rentals appear
Mm.
to be good income, should
Yeah,
cover the cost. Just a
yeah.
bit concerned about high body corporate costs, and there's not a
Mm.
fixed income stream. Has anyone else done this, and what are your thoughts?
Well, look, Ross, my husband and I had a property in the Adelaide Hills that was our principal place of residence. We bought another, and then we put that up as an Airbnb. And I've got to say, until you've done it, you don't actually know how much work it is to do it. Even if you have a company managing it for you, I found it's really high stress. Okay, you're right. Income is not guaranteed. What if there's cyclones or something, and it's or in our case, COVID hit, right? And no one could rent it, so we've got an Airbnb sitting there empty because no one was able to rent it. That's a personal thing. The costs of doing it, like the management fees, are 20% plus. So you've got to factor all of that in. Not something I would do
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Yeah. That's also like
Jared?
cleaners, you get
Yeah,
you get someone that comes in and goes, "Oh, we want a booking
yeah,
last minute," and then someone like Port
yeah,
Douglas, "Oh, let's get a cleaner." Oh no, they've got to come up from
yeah.
Cairns, and so then your cleaning costs go through the roof. I think Airbnbs, yes, can work, but from a scale side, there's a lot of bigger
Mm,
companies that go, "Yeah, we've got 50 that we might own 10, but they're managed for others," and then again, it's that
mm,
scalability. I think for me, there's a lot more growth and potential to be made out of long-term rentals and buying in those right areas to give you that growth, and again, getting that balance. Airbnbs, yeah, I think it's just too much stress.
mm,
I personally wouldn't do it.
Yep.
I think if you've got that premium, that amazing warehouse sitting in that prime position somewhere that, I don't know, could double as a wedding venue, which poses other risks as well. Because then, and I just thought about it then, but then there's the drug factor and the drug fueled parties that come into it, and your insurance that doesn't cover it. I think there was one in Brisbane a couple of months ago, and some schoolies booked it through their parents' name just for a quiet, end of school, whatever it may be, party, and that turned into something else. And yeah, the whole street was trashed, the
mm,
house was trashed, there's no insurance, and yeah, it's just a risk. But the other thing is like the government, like and don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 2, 3 years ago, the Victorian government changed their rules and regulations where they limited the amount of nights per week or per year that the property could be
Mm.
leased out for Airbnb, and it was dramatic. I think it was like down to 200 maybe nights per year. Again, don't
Mm.
quote me, but yeah, big risks all of a sudden. You've lost all of your income, all of your profit overnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm very, very cautious when people say that they're
Yeah.
gonna, they want to look into Airbnb and things like that. I think if you're going down the Airbnb route, in order to make enough money, you need to basically run it as your business. Like
Mm.
that is your thing, right? And you're not using a management company, you're doing it. So I think, if it's something that you're going to be extremely hands-on with and you're going to do it all, and I don't know, maybe you're approaching retirement and it's going to be your thing when you retire and you're going to do all of it. But I just think people forget how, like we've all stayed in an Airbnb. How many times you message the owner for all sorts of stuff? You're
Yeah.
like, the remote control's not working, the internet's cut out. Like it's not pain-free at all. Like it is painful. Like if you're operating that and then you think, I paid $250 for the night, and then I've messaged them all these times, and Airbnb have taken their cut, and then the management
Yeah.
company have taken their cut,
Yeah.
and then the
Yeah.
cleaner's got to come in and take their bit, and then actually you sit there and you think at the end of it, after I've paid tax and all this income as well, I just
It's not
I
great.
don't see the benefit of it at all. I just think buying good assets
Yeah.
and I think the other thing, look, people get romantic about these things, don't they? Is that especially if they live in the city or whatever, and they're like, wouldn't it be great to have a holiday home Airbnb? But the other thing is as well is that you go to that same property, you might use it for 3 weekends a year. I don't know if it's your Airbnb. After about 3 or 4 years, you get bored of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to the
Absolutely.
same place every time.
Mm.
You've got to upgrade your TV and you've got to upgrade all your furniture. And it's just, yeah. And you've got to do deep cleans. The thing that people don't realize is that Google reviews the big thing. Like every 3 months, you've got to remove everything out of there to do a deep clean because, there's rubbish behind the couch and it takes one person to go, "Oh, there was a wrapper behind here or there was something there." And before you know it, your 5-star rating's down to 4.5. And it's just, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think we've covered that question. The advice is don't bother.
In a nutshell.
Yeah. All right. Question number 2. We are little mum and dad investors in Victoria, and the land tax is a killer. We are
Mm.
contemplating selling our Victoria investments and investing elsewhere. What are your thoughts?
Good idea. Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, the land tax in Victoria, it does really take out that bottom line for the profit. And it's a cost ongoing every year. The government then revalues your land, and all of a sudden, even though you've done nothing, you're suddenly paying more. So I actually would say, yeah, if they're concerned about it, I would be selling and buying somewhere else.
I
Yeah.
think when you look at some of the big players that have pulled out, and don't quote me again, but that guy from the block, Danny, who buys in weird numbers, he's now sold, if I think half of his properties in Victoria alone, if not more, to buy interstate. I think
Mm.
when the big guys start doing it, and who don't really care so much about the bottom line because they have so much income, I think when they do it,
Mm,
that's a bit of a sign.
mm,
Yeah, it's basically like having, you go and buy a freestanding property and then all of a sudden you have these surprise body corporate fees come out of it by way of tax. It's the same thing. It's just, your yield goes from 6% down to 3.5%. And, who likes paying tax? No one.
yeah. No one
Yeah.
likes paying tax. Yeah, I
But if
agree.
they want to buy a good property in Queensland, then there's good tax up here, that's for sure.
It's ridiculous. It's like, and especially when you're like, especially like little mum and dad investors, they might have 1 or 2 investment properties. You don't want that stress of additional things that you've got to sort out and pay for, and it's a nightmare.
Mm.
Whereas New South Wales, Western Australia, Queensland, it's a lot simpler. The tax is cheaper, the stamp duty is cheaper. They're not out to get you, which
Yeah.
I feel like they are in Victoria. Cool. Okay, right. Let's move on to the final question. So a bit of a background. My wife and I are in our early 40s. We have 4 children, um, and we are in the first time of our lives feeling like we've got financial freedom. We have a combined income of $300,000. We are almost debt free. We live in regional Western Australia and live in a heavily subsidized house. So I imagine they are mining or government. We are looking to buy a house. We haven't built anything, but we have got savings. We really want to get started in investing. Any help or guidance would be appreciated.
Good
Bit of
position
a
to be
broad,
in.
yeah, very good position to be in,
Yeah.
but bit of a broad question too.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I think they've definitely got to look for the long term. Good position to be almost debt free at their age. Obviously, 4 kids, you make an assumption at their age that they're nearing high school. So depending on private school, public, a lot of cash getting chewed up from that side, but still a lot of free cash from investment piece. I think. Yeah, I don't know. It is a very broad question, and it's something we've got to look at, long term, because it'd be easy to go, okay, cool. You go out with a 5 property strategy over the next 5 to 7 years and
Mm.
pull out X, Y, Z. But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah, look, as you said, it's very broad. I think you would have to sit down with someone and sort of work out, okay, what is your end goal? Right? So are you just buying it because everyone says, oh, you should buy a house, right? So, okay, so if you're wanting to buy a property, why? Would you ever live there? Is it going to be an investment property? Like you said, Jared, how old are the kids? What are your expenses going to be in years to come? It's almost like how long's a piece of string? We don't have probably enough information to really help and provide that answer. I would suggest sitting down with someone, absolutely, whether it's, a mortgage broker, you might have a financial planner, even talking to an accountant as well, because if you're buying an investment property, a lot of people forget to look at what's that going to do for their tax position. So there are so many different variables that I think this couple really would need to sit down and really develop a plan on what do we really want to do and how do we then go forward with that.
Yeah, yeah. And look, it says they're in their early 30s, right? 4 children, they're in subsidized housing. I think if they can stay in subsidized housing for as long as possible, as long as they're happy, they should probably
Yeah.
do that. And then look, they're on a combined income of 300 grand. If they want to get into a position where, I don't know, they reach retirement and then they've got their principal place of residence, which they will eventually have to move into, I imagine, after they finish working,
Mm.
they're going to want that paid off. So I mean, if I'm gonna generalize my recommendations for them, I would probably say, yeah, you need to sit down with an accountant, financial advisor, definitely a broker, and then essentially just see what your options are,
Mm.
and then maybe work on 2 or 3 strategies. Okay, so this is what one would look like, this is what the second
Yeah.
option would look like, this is what the third one would look like. But ultimately, if they're debt free and they retire,
Yeah.
the next step really, I think, and position. But the key piece is,
Yeah. Yep.
but if they're happy in subsidized housing, great, stick with that. Keep your
Mm.
expenses low, so
Absolutely.
you've got borrowing power with the
Yeah.
banks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wish
Yeah.
I was
No,
in subsidised housing.
so do I.
Yeah.
dear. But it all comes back to that education, right? We
Yeah.
talked about when we first started, people don't know what they don't know. This couple as well, they need to educate themselves. They need to go and ask the questions. As you said, Ross, build that team around them to work out which way forward. And that's not something you'd have a chat to your mate at a barbecue about because they don't have the necessary education or experience or qualifications to really help them.
Absolutely. Just have small talk, have a good beer, have a wine, and
Yeah.
no conversation about your life. Well, in terms of your future, what you should do.
In
Or
terms of
Other
politics.
finance.
conversations, but
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us on, Ross. Talk soon.
That's it.
thank you, Rosh.
Bye.
Appreciate it.